Have you ever noticed how the warm, generous spirit of the holiday season often clashes with the loudest religious voices claiming the season for themselves? Every year, some folks insist there's a war on Christmas, while completely missing the simple human goodness the season invites. Hope, patience, kindness, and genuine connection with the people in our lives. Welcome to Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the third Sunday of Advent, we'll explore how the season's deepest values can outshine the manufactured outrage, and how ancient stories can help us practice the kind of goodness that actually makes life better. No supernatural guarantees required. In this episode, we're asking what our world would look like if we carried the best parts of the holiday season, our generosity, our patience, our resilience, into the rest of the year. And what gets in the way of doing that with the people we love the most? So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the third Sunday of Advent, Cycle A of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. In this series, we're exploring readings from the Bible through the lens of sacred myth, looking for interpretations and lessons that don't require belief in the supernatural. These texts were written by pre-scientific people, shaped by their own cultures, needs, and agendas, not as history books or scientific manuals, but as meaning-making stories for their communities. And just like believers approach these writings through the lens of faith, I approach them through a more humanistic lens, one grounded in the idea that certain foundational values helped humans evolve and flourish. Now, you might agree with the lessons I find, or you might find something completely different. That's the beauty of treating these writings as sacred myth. We're free to negotiate with the text and discover whatever insights we need right now. So with that, let's dive in. As I said, tonight we'll be looking at the readings for the third Sunday of Advent, Cycle A. Our first reading is from the prophet Isaiah. It's chapter 35, verses 1 through 6a and verse 10. Our second reading is from the book of James. It's chapter 5, verses 7 through 10. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. It's chapter 11, verses 2 through 11. Now we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings, then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one. Finally, we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from Isaiah. The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear, your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer and the mute tongue shout for joy. Those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. Our second reading is from James. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. And our gospel reading is from Matthew. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear fine clothes are in kings' palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." All right, so let's go back and take a critical look at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. So our first reading was from Isaiah. And this passage from Isaiah follows a chapter that's just overflowing with fear, judgment, and divine punishment. Yet suddenly the tone changes. Now we don't see that because the lectionary skips all over the place to pull out the messages that it's looking for. Anyway, this reading paints a picture of a world that's transformed. Deserts blooming, bodies healed, joy returning. Even though the lectionary trims out the more fantastical imagery, it's springs erupting in wastelands, predators disappearing, a perfectly safe holy highway. Right? That's in the verses the lectionary skipped. The intent, though, is still pretty clear. Isaiah was trying to lift people's spirits in a bleak moment by offering this vivid, imaginative picture of renewal. And honestly, that's not a bad instinct. When times are hard, we humans tell stories that help us to look beyond the struggle. But the verses that were cut out of this reading, they're pretty revealing. The church prefers to skip the parts that don't match its claims about Jesus as the Messiah, because the physical predictions, the ones that they skipped, well, they just didn't happen. But rather than wrestling with that tension, the lectionary just sort of sidesteps it. An example of what I generally call lazy theology. Yet, when apologists insist these images were never meant literally, well, they're actually doing what we're doing here. They're treating the text as mythic storytelling, not as a historical forecast. Right? They keep the verses that support their narrative, they discard the ones that don't, and then insist the whole thing still somehow counts as a fulfilled prophecy. But Isaiah's purpose wasn't to give a timeline for a future savior. He was trying to help his community survive the despair they were feeling. His audience needed a reason to remain resilient while living through political instability and cultural upheaval. And we get that because we're living it too. Isaiah wasn't promising a miracle. He was offering a vision big enough to keep people moving forward. When we read these passages through a more humanistic lens, we see that the real power isn't in the supernatural claims, but in the emotional and psychological truth underneath. People thrive when they can imagine a future that's worth walking toward. So the main lesson I got from our first reading is that hope helps us be more resilient. Instead of debating whether these predictions ever came true, we can honor the text by recognizing what Isaiah was doing, giving his people a story of possibility when everything felt uncertain. Hope is not a magical force. It's a human one. It steadies us. It fuels resilience. And when we choose to picture a better future, even an imperfect or symbolic one, we strengthen our ability to endure and to take meaningful action. Hope helps us be more resilient. Our second reading was from the book of James. And James, the brother of Jesus, is essentially doing what wisdom teachers have done for centuries. He's offering practical, down-to-earth advice to a community that was under stress. James was a leader in the early Jerusalem church, and the early Christians there were anxiously waiting for Jesus to return in their own lifetime. And when that didn't happen, impatience and frustration sort of naturally set in. We might not be waiting for the apocalypse today, but we absolutely know what impatience feels like. We live in a world where same-day delivery, instant notifications, and hyper-efficiency have trained us to expect everything now. We've become accustomed to instant gratification. Patience has become almost countercultural. James points to the farmer who has no choice but to wait for the rains. It's a reminder that some things in life, well, they unfold on their own timeline, no matter how much we push or worry. And this is deeply human wisdom. Much of what matters, growth, healing, learning, relationships, can't be rushed. When we pretend otherwise, we just exhaust ourselves. Now, the text also warns the community not to turn their frustration on each other. When people feel powerless or stressed, it's incredibly easy to let irritation spill over into blame, criticism, or even resentment. It's not a religious problem, it's a human problem. Now, once we set aside the supernatural warning that God will judge you for grumbling, the message becomes even more clear. Our impatience hurts real people. It erodes trust, it narrows our capacity for empathy, and it damages relationships that we rely on. Patience, on the other hand, is a cooperative act. Patience creates space for people to grow, for situations to develop, and for solutions to emerge. In an age of constant acceleration, practicing patience isn't passive. In fact, it's courageous. It's choosing steadiness when everything around us just seems to insist that we have to hurry, to react, or to demand immediate outcomes. Anyway, the main lesson I got from our second reading is that we must learn patience and be kind to one another. James wasn't simply telling people to wait for a divine event. He was urging them to stop letting urgency erode their compassion. The farmer's example reminds us that life's most meaningful processes require time, and that while we wait, how we treat each other matters incredibly. We don't need divine judgment to motivate kindness. We just need to recognize the truth that impatience makes life harder, while patience strengthens our shared humanity. We must learn patience and be kind to one another. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Matthew. And this passage opens with John the Baptist imprisoned and uncertain, sending his followers to ask Jesus whether he is the one. Instead of offering a clear yes or no, Jesus responds with coded language, references to healings and signs that the author of Matthew knew would resonate with John's imagination. It's clever storytelling, and it was written decades after the events it allegedly describes, and it reinforces the gospel's agenda, which is portraying Jesus as the long-awaited fulfillment of prophecy. But viewed through a humanistic lens, the real moment here isn't the supernatural claim. It's the very human uncertainty that John expresses. He wants clarity. He wants something solid to hold on to. That's something we all understand. That's why he sent his disciples to question Jesus. Then Jesus pivots to the crowd with that rhetorical question, "What did you go out into the wilderness to see?" He praises John as the greatest prophet. And then the narrative takes a sort of a sharp turn. The author claims Jesus said that the least person in the kingdom of heaven will be greater than John the freaking Baptist. That line has been used for centuries to flatter believers and to reinforce the church's authority. Oh, just follow us, stay loyal, obey what we preach, and you'll be even greater than the greatest prophet. It's spiritual marketing at its finest. The reward is enormous. The path is exclusive. And, of course, the institution conveniently claims to hold the only map. But when we strip away the supernatural framing and the institutional sales pitch, the reading reveals a deeper caution. This is what happens when people base their ethics on supernatural promises that no one can prove. It becomes extremely easy for leaders, ancient or modern, to manipulate hopes, fears, and insecurities. Human beings deserve something sturdier than that. We shouldn't be good because someone promises a reward someday or threatens eternal punishment after we die. We should be good because our values, cooperation, fairness, integrity, compassion, our values shape us into better people now. Ethical living doesn't need a cosmic prize attached to it. It just needs intention and courage. So the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that we should do good because of our values, not unprovable supernatural promises. John's question, Jesus' indirect answer, and the author's elevation of believers all point to a larger truth. When morality hinges on supernatural promises, people can be led anywhere. But when morality is rooted in values we can examine, test, and live out in real time, it becomes something stronger and more freeing. We don't need a guaranteed ticket to heaven to justify kindness, justice, or integrity. A meaningful life doesn't depend on mythical rewards. It depends on how we choose to show up every single freaking day. We should do good because of our values, not because of unprovable supernatural promises. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from Isaiah, the main lesson I came away with was hope helps us be more resilient. In our second reading from James, the main lesson I got was we must learn patience and be kind to one another. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was we should do good because of our values, not unprovable supernatural promises. The holiday season brings out the best in so many of us. Whether we celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, the solstice, or simply just the chance to gather with people we love. For a few weeks each year, we tend to slow down, give more thoughtfully, and practice a little extra kindness. But we don't need twinkling lights or festive music to live that way. When we hold on to hope, real human hope that helps us stay resilient, when we practice patience instead of letting stress turn us against each other, and when we ground our choices in values we consciously choose rather than promises no one can prove, those warm holiday feelings don't have to fade. They can become a way of life. And imagine what our world could look like if we carried that spirit of compassion and steadiness into the ordinary days of February or June, October. The season may end, but the goodness doesn't have to. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and see if we can figure out what these lessons really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what? And now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care because the so-called war on Christmas is really just an attempt at inclusion. But there is a war for exclusion. When people get angry about hearing happy holidays, it isn't about protecting Christmas. It's about protecting a narrow identity that excludes everyone who doesn't fit it. And when exclusion gets celebrated as righteousness, the rest of us need to hold on to hope, real human hope, that inclusive, values-based goodness still matters and still has power. But this is important because resilience is essential when we're dealing with loud, baseless outrage. Evangelicals and Christian nationalists have turned victimhood into their brand, and they wield it every December. Even though white Christians are the dominant cultural and political force in the U.S., they still clutch their pearls and claim that they are the ones being persecuted. If we let their constant complaints wear us down, we lose the bigger picture. Resilience allows us to keep doing the quiet, daily work of building a more welcoming world, even when others insist on seeing enemies where none exist. We should care about this because patience and unity are the antidotes to their division. While exclusionary voices stay remarkably organized, the rest of us, humanists, values-based Christians, people of many different faiths or none at all, we sometimes get tangled in small disagreements or we lose patience with one another. But if we want a society that's grounded in compassion and fairness, we can't afford to fracture like that. Patience isn't passive. It's the skill that keeps coalitions alive. This is important because foundational values, not supernatural threats or promises, foundational values are what create lasting goodness. The people pushing the whole war on Christmas narrative cling to a distorted version of faith that elevates judgment and hierarchy. We don't need to mirror that. If we unite around values that transcend belief systems, things like kindness, fairness, integrity, cooperation, we can carry the spirit of goodness well past December. No angels required. No prophecy needed. Just everyday people living their values together. And the last question I try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Well, sometimes the hardest place to practice our values is in our closest relationships. It's easy to talk about patience, kindness, and resilience in the abstract. But day-to-day life has a way of testing those qualities in very real, very human ways. And often the people we love most end up receiving the most unfiltered versions of our stress, frustration, or distraction. So this week, let's shift the focus inward a bit. Not to blame ourselves, but to get honest about how we show up for the people who matter the most to us. So with that in mind, here's your question for the week. What gets in the way of showing love to the people in your life the way you actually want to? And what would happen if, for 1 week, you made them your top priority? This question matters because it pushes us past vague intentions and into practical, everyday choices. When we look closely at our habits, at how we speak to our partner when we're tired, how patient we are with our kids, how present we are with our friends, we start to see the small gaps between our values and our actions. And that's where real growth begins. I'll be completely honest. I have always struggled to give the people I care about the attention they deserve. I get caught up in whatever I'm thinking about or whatever project I'm working on. And I've always had some project or another taking up mental space. For most of my life, I've described myself as a low-maintenance friend. The kind of person you can go years without contact with and then happily pick up where we left off. And I've told people not to worry if they don't reach out to me because I assume they're just busy with their own important things. But when I really sit with that, I can see those weren't just friendly reassurances. They were ways of protecting myself from having to admit that I simply wasn't reaching out either. The truth is, when I look closely, I realize I haven't always been a great friend or family member. I let way too much time pass before reconnecting. Part of it is that I don't enjoy talking on the phone. Oddly enough, I love a good Zoom chat. Something about seeing someone's face helps me show up more fully. But that preference doesn't really excuse the deeper pattern here. I've relied on my own busyness as a shield, a kind of permanent permission slip to drift in and out of people's lives without much intention. Now that my wife and I have moved back to Michigan after 18 years away, the pattern feels impossible to ignore. Most of our family and many of our friends are here, and reconnecting shouldn't be an abstract idea. It should be something that I'm practicing. I can't just focus on whoever happens to be physically in front of me. I need to make time to reach out, to stay connected, and to rebuild relationships that matter to me. And I've realized this isn't a fix it once and you're done kind of issue. I have to keep revisiting it because those old habits are stubborn and they sneak back in when I'm not paying attention. The people I love won't be around forever, and neither will I. So connection can't be an afterthought. It has to be part of how I live. I may not have figured out why those patterns keep reasserting themselves, but I can keep trying. And in the meantime, I can remind myself over and over that the people I love deserve to be a top priority far more often than my overloaded mind wants to admit. So I really encourage you to spend time with this week's question. What gets in the way of showing love to the people in your life the way you actually want to? And what would happen if, for 1 week, you made them your top priority? By understanding what blocks us, whether it's stress, impatience, old habits and patterns, or simple distraction, we can start making conscious adjustments. This isn't about perfection. It's about practice. When you intentionally turn toward the people who need you, even in small ways, relationships strengthen, tensions ease, and your own sense of groundedness grows. Prioritizing the humans closest to you isn't just good for them. It makes your own life calmer, kinder, and far more aligned with the person you want to be. Well, before I wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with one more thought. French philosopher Simone Weil once wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. It's a deceptively simple line, but it cuts right to the heart of our question this week. When we think of generosity, we often picture gifts or resources or big gestures, but Weil reminds us that the most meaningful thing we can offer another human being is our full, undivided attention. And that's exactly what our reflection invites us to practice, turning toward the people we love instead of letting distraction or stress or old habits keep us distant. When we give someone our attention, when we put down our goddamn phones and really pay attention, we're telling them they matter. We're saying, I see you. I hear you. I'm here with you. That kind of presence strengthens relationships in ways no supernatural promise ever could. That sort of positive attention creates trust. It deepens connection and helps us show up as the kind of people we actually want to be. And on a practical level, it changes the tone of our days. Less frustration, less miscommunication, more moments of real closeness. So as you reflect this week on what gets in the way of showing love the way you intend to, remember Weil's insight. Generosity isn't always grand. Sometimes it's as simple and as challenging as choosing to pay attention. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week. But in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our question for the week and pay attention to the important lessons you come across wherever you find them. You'll create a more purposeful and joyful life, and you'll start to feel more connected to the world and the people around you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the third Sunday of Advent, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that the holiday season will end, but the goodness doesn't have to. The Bible readings used for this episode are from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV. Copyright 1973, 1978, 1984, 2011 by Biblica Inc. Used by permission, all rights reserved worldwide. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is a live-streamed series held most Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/thecodaproject. Every week, the audio of these Mythologizing the Bible presentations is released as a podcast. You can find the podcast at thecodaproject.com or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Pocket Casts. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.